For many players, The Legend of Zelda is the template for what makes a good adventure game, and many game developers tend to agree with that statement. While it's not the only game that heavily inspires the action-adventure RPG genre, The Legend of Zelda has definitely left its mark on gaming as a whole. So today we're going to talk about some games that you would probably like if you enjoy The Legend of Zelda. Whether you're looking for a new world to explore, new enemies to battle, or a twist on a familiar formula, one of these games is definitely for you. And if you'd like to see what games I talked about ahead of time, you can hop around this video using the chapters in the description. Let's kick things right off with a great game called Moonlighter. You assume the role of a character who by day seems like nothing more than a merchant, someone who sells their items to local townsfolk at fair prices and provides a place for people to just happily shop. But by night, this character is fighting weird monsters in dungeons and taking goods from those dungeons and bringing them back to the store to sell them. But the catch is, you can't die in the dungeon or you lose everything you found. Moonlighter's dungeons are very familiar to those found in top-down Legend of Zelda games. One screen at a time and there's enemies all over the place. However, the game does add its own flair by giving you the ability to roll away from attacks as well as level up different weapons, so you're not just stuck with a sword or a bow. There's also spears and fist weapons and all these other things you can level up. And then on the merchant side of things, you have to bring your goods to the store and set them up and set prices on them. These prices may or may not be too high or too low considering the worth of the product, and you'll learn more about those things as people buy them. A customer might see a 10,000 gold price tag on that orb you found, but that might be way too high and they're going to let you know. On the other hand, if you charge 200 gold for it, they're going to say, wow, that's a great deal, and then you're going to realize you got ripped off. The game does a great job of placing equal weight on dungeon crawling and the merchant stuff, so the whole thing feels really cohesive and fun. But if you're looking for something that's more focused on combat and exploration, then I think the next game might be right up your alley. You may have already heard of Hyperlight Drifter. It's pretty popular at this point, but let's talk about it anyway. You play as a character known as the Drifter, who has a very mysterious past. All we do know is that they have a lightsaber and they have a cool cloak, and I think that's enough to go on for now. The game uses a silent narrative to tell a story, but let's get into what that means. Rather than telling you their story by using dialogue boxes, the game's characters show you pictures of what they've been through. You're given a visual history of where they've been up until the moment that you met them, how they got to be where they are. Not only does this help you slowly unravel the character story, it also gives you a bigger idea of what actually happened in the world that you're in. Why are there gigantic corpses around? Why is everything pretty much dead? And why are these monsters attacking? These are things that you can only learn by playing the game and exploring each dungeon and seeing what everything's made of. That being said, the storytelling does not take main stage here. This game is all about the combat. As you explore, you're going to find currency that you can bring back to town, which you'll then use to buy upgrades for your combat. Whether it's a new grenade or more damage for your gun, this game has a lot to offer when it comes to customizing the way you play as you move through it. Your character's dealing with some kind of illness, which you'll learn about throughout the game, and ultimately it just feels like a really cool contrast of neon purple and sad thoughts. Hyperlight Drifter does a great job of balancing that contrast and giving you a world to explore and also fight your way through. And the music is oddly reminiscent of the original Legend of Zelda, and while the music is much more high-tech in Hyperlight Drifter, it still has this same dark, dreary, chiptune-y buzz to it. I think you'll know what I mean when you hear it. So we've got the dreary and sad world in Hyperlight Drifter. Let's talk about something a little more uplifting, like a game called Kamiko. Kamiko is a very fast-paced dungeon crawler. In the game, you pick from one of 3 characters which have different abilities and weapons, and the goal of each level is to cleanse 4 shrines to then ultimately fight a boss. And unlike other dungeon crawlers where you'll be taking your time and exploring, Kamiko really encourages you to fly through these dungeons. So while your goal is to cleanse these shrines, you cannot do so unless you focus on fighting as many enemies as possible. The energy you get from killing enemies can be used for your special move, which will help you clear a board, but it's also used to move through the game and open these shrines. And when you're done with a dungeon and beat the boss, the game actually gives you a time on how long you're playing in total and also how long it took you to complete that dungeon. The developers of Kamiko seem to have gone out of their way to make a speedrun friendly Zelda-like game, so if that's what you're looking for, then this game is definitely for you. And finally, let's talk about a game I've had my eye on for a while, but I only recently got around to playing, and that's a game called Hob. Hob is another game that uses its silent narrative to its advantage. In the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game, you're gonna have a great idea of what the dynamic is between this giant golem creature and your character. And they share almost no words, which I thought was really powerful, a really good way to tell a story and get me invested in the world overall. And I think of all the games I've talked about, Hob is the one that is most balanced when it comes to exploring and combat. It's very important to learn how to fight in this game, but it's also very important to learn how to explore, what boxes to push around, and what jumps you can make. And similar to The Legend of Zelda, you'll find upgrades to your golem arm, which which then give you more abilities, which let you move to new areas. Overall, it's really easy to recommend Hob to anybody who likes Zelda games. I mean, you can compare them to whichever Zelda game you want. If you like exploring and combat equally, then this game is definitely right up your alley. The aesthetic is great, it's really clean and nice to look at. You can turn gore on and off. I turned it off. It didn't feel right to have these big creatures gushing blood. It just didn't fit in this world that was otherwise really pretty. That being said, if you're the kind of person who loves gore in video games, then there's definitely blood splatters for you in Hob. So with all these games on the table, what's a game that you think of when you think of action-adventure RPGs? Maybe you think a different game inspired the genre more than Zelda. I'd love to know what you think of that in the comments. If you liked this video, make sure you liked the video. It goes a long way. And if you really like the video, make sure you subscribe because I like to talk about video games all the time. If you like hearing about video games, then we are going to get along just fine. Other than that, I hope you have a great day. Please stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video.